He thought I was asleep. He always did. That was his mistake. For weeks, I'd felt something was off, like a draft slipping in through a window I couldn't quite locate. I chalked it up to aging nerves. Too many hours alone in this old house. But that night, as I lay in bed pretending to sleep, I heard the unmistakable sound of someone creeping through my bedroom. Not Lauren. Her footsteps were soft, rhythmic, familiar. This was heavier, intentional. I kept my eyes closed as the floor creaked near my dresser. I knew what he was looking for, the safe key. I kept it in the same taped spot under the drawer since the day I bought that safe. Back when Alice was still alive and we needed a place to store documents that mattered. Marriage certificate, birth certificates, title deed. A few valuables, some cash, nothing fancy. Just a life in a box. Took him 3 tries to find the right drawer. I heard the shuffle of papers, the low curse when something slid out of place. Then silence, too much of it, followed by the faintest gasp. That's when I knew he'd found it. The key. My son-in-law, Nate. By the time he tiptoed back to the guest room down the hall, I was sitting upright, eyes wide open in the dark. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the shadows on the wall, listening to the house breathe, trying to keep my own heartbeat quiet. My first thought was rage, sure, but it passed. What settled in its place was something colder, something sharper. I was tired of pretending not to see what was happening. Nate had been circling me for weeks, asking questions that didn't make sense. What kind of security system did I use? Was the safe digital or manual? Who had copies of my house keys? Did I go to the bank in person or use online banking? Lauren had brushed it off. "He's just worried about you, Dad," she said one evening while drying dishes beside me. "You're alone in this big house. It's natural he'd be concerned." But I wasn't concerned. I was insulted. They'd come to stay just for a month or two, after Nate had been let go from a consulting firm I'd never heard of. Lauren hadn't asked for anything, not directly. She'd cried on the phone that morning, voice cracking just like when she was 7 and scraped her knee. "We just need some time to get back on our feet." Of course, I said yes. Of course, I let them in. I even gave them the room Alice had used for her sewing. Cleared out her threads and fabrics, boxed up the antique machine she loved, and stored it in the attic. Lauren never even noticed. But from the moment they moved in, Nate began studying the house like a blueprint. He noticed things most people wouldn't, like the false back in the bookcase or the schedule I followed for trash pickup. One night, I caught him in the garage pretending to look for batteries. My old filing cabinets were back there, locked but still. And now the key, my key, in his hands. In the morning, I made pancakes. I poured Nate his coffee just the way he liked it, black, 2 sugars. He smiled like nothing had happened. "You sleep all right?" I asked him. He nodded. "Yeah, real quiet neighborhood. I slept like a rock." I smiled back. Glad to hear it. Lauren was at work. Nate was between opportunities, as he put it. So he stayed home, roamed, sat on the porch like a dog without a leash. That day I stayed close. I pretended to organize tools in the garage. Listened to his phone calls. Muffled but urgent, low and angry. Words like deadline, interest, they're getting impatient floated through the drywall. He had debts. That much was obvious. What he didn't know was that he was talking in my house. A house built by my hands. Paid off long before he even met my daughter. I'd put in the beams, hung the drywall, poured the foundation. I'd buried Alice from this house. I'd watched Lauren take her first steps in the hallway, standing right where Nate now dropped his muddy boots. This wasn't just property. This was memory, and he was planning to steal it from me. That night, I removed the contents of the safe and replaced them with something else entirely. Then I carefully retaped the spare key in the same place under the drawer. Just crooked enough to look like he'd beaten me. He was going to open that safe soon. And when he did, he'd find exactly what I wanted him to find. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I thought, let the game begin. The next morning, I started early. I was downstairs by 6 a.m., per usual, making eggs and toast, the smell of butter and burnt crumbs wafting through the kitchen. I wanted Nate to smell it, To be reminded how utterly normal things seemed. That was the key. Keep the mask on. He walked in around 7:30, hair messy, still in sweatpants. Didn't say good morning. He never did. He poured himself coffee and leaned against the fridge like he owned the place. "You get out much these days?" he asked, like he was talking to someone half senile. "Some," I said. "Mostly errands. Groceries, post office, pharmacy." He sipped, watching me over the rim of the mug. "Ever think about, I don't know, downsizing?" I didn't flinch. "Why would I do that? Just seems like a lot of house for one person," he said. "Could cash out, travel, move somewhere warm. Arizona, maybe." I shrugged. "Never been interested in heat. And I like my neighbors." He nodded slowly, masking the irritation behind his teeth. I could see him working the angles. The plan he thought he'd architected without my notice. He left shortly after breakfast, muttering something about checking in with a headhunter. That was his code for disappearing for 2 hours while he made calls in the park, likely to creditors or whoever he owed. I knew what desperation looked like. I'd seen it in the mirror back when Alice was sick and we were running out of options. But my desperation never turned into betrayal. While he was gone, I checked the safe. It was still locked, untouched, but the contents had changed. Gone were the actual documents. Deed, savings bonds, investment files, Alice's jewelry, the emergency cash. Those I'd moved to a lockbox at the bank 3 days ago. Instead, the safe now held 3 things. A stack of fake bank statements, impressive enough to fool someone who didn't know how to read them right. A letter addressed to Lauren, sealed. And an old .38 revolver unloaded with a single post-it note on top that read, "I see you." I closed the safe, reset the lock, and left the key exactly where he'd find it again if he checked. Same angle, same old tape, just enough to convince him the breach went unnoticed. I didn't want to catch him in the act. I wanted him to think he'd gotten away with it. That afternoon, Lauren came home early, holding a bag of groceries and a small bouquet of flowers. "For the dining table," she said cheerfully. "Thought they'd brighten the room." I thanked her and helped arrange them in Alice's old vase. Hydrangeas, Alice's favorite. I wondered if Lauren remembered that. We sat for a while, drinking tea. She seemed tired, but not unhappy. "I know it's not ideal," she said at one point, looking down into her mug. "Staying here again. Nate's doing his best, you know. The job market's just—" "Lauren," I said gently, "you don't need to explain. This is still your home." She looked up, her eyes full of gratitude. But there was something else there too. Doubt? Exhaustion? Couldn't tell. "You always made everything feel safe," she said. "Even when Mom was sick. Even when we were broke." I never felt it. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Because what I wanted to say was, "You're still safe." But not because of him. That evening, I stayed up late, reading in the living room while the house settled into quiet. I heard them go to bed. Their door closed. The floor creaked once. Then silence. At 12:47 a.m., the hallway floor creaked again. Then my bedroom door. Then the safe. I didn't move. Didn't even breathe too loud. Just sat there in the dark, staring at the wall, listening to the sounds of a man sealing his fate. 15 minutes later, the floor creaked again. The guest room door opened, then closed. And I smiled to myself. He thought he had me, but he had no idea. The next morning felt like the pause between lightning and thunder. I heard them in the kitchen before I got up. Nate's voice low and urgent. Lauren replying with that automatic calm she'd used since she was a teenager, defusing tension. When I finally walked in, she was buttering toast, eyes puffy like she hadn't slept. Nate stood at the window pretending to admire the backyard. He didn't look at me. That told me everything I needed to know. "Morning," I said. Lauren managed to smile. "Morning, Dad." I made extra coffee. I poured myself a cup, pretending not to notice how Nate's hands were clenched on the edge of the counter. He kept glancing toward the hallway, like he expected someone to walk in and arrest him. But nothing happened. I just sipped my coffee, leaned against the sink, and asked, "Anything interesting on the news?" Nate flinched like I'd slapped him, then quickly recovered. "Nope," he said. "Same old." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's the thing about the world. People think they get away with stuff until they don't." Lauren looked between us, puzzled. I took another sip and smiled. Around noon, Lauren left for work again. Nate claimed he was going to apply in person for something downtown. "A networking lunch," he said. I nodded but didn't ask questions. I watched him grab his coat and keys with exaggerated casualness, like someone trying to act normal while a body lies buried in the backyard. He was unraveling. That was good. It meant he'd read the note, and he'd seen the gun, even if he didn't know it wasn't loaded. By 3 p.m., the plan kicked into its next phase. I called my lawyer, Deborah Lynn. We'd worked together for years, since Alice got sick, and she was the only person I trusted with the full story. I asked her to make a few quiet changes to my will and update the power of attorney documents. Then I called an old friend of mine, Charlie Renner, retired sheriff's deputy and my fishing buddy for the last 20 years. "You think he's planning to rob you?" Charlie asked. "Worse," I said. "I think he's already started." He didn't hesitate. "You want me to come by tonight?" "No, not yet." I explained everything. The key, the safe, the call I overheard last week when Nate didn't know I was standing behind the hallway door. I hadn't recorded it, unfortunately, but I remembered every word. Debts, threats, the plan to grab whatever he could and disappear. "You're gonna let it play out?" Charlie asked. I said yes, because I wanted Nate to think he was in control, until the exact second he realized he wasn't. When Lauren got home that night, she looked more tired than I'd ever seen her. She kicked off her shoes in the entryway and dropped her bag with a sigh. "Long day?" I asked. She nodded. "We had a meeting about layoffs. Nothing decided yet, but it doesn't look good." I offered her dinner. She declined. Too tired to eat. She looked like she was carrying someone else's weight on her back. And in a way, she was. I thought about Nate's lies, the tension in his voice, the paranoia when he looked at me, and the fact that she still had no idea. I hated that. I hated that the only way to protect her now was to hurt her later. That night, I waited again. Lights off. Book open. Eyes on the clock. At 11:13 p.m., I heard his voice. Not inside the house, outside, near the porch. "Not yet. I told you I'm still working on it. No, I found cash, but not enough. I need more time." He was pacing. But I got into the safe. "The old man has documents. Property titles. If I can get him to sign." He stopped. Probably noticed my shadow in the window. I stepped back, just enough for him to think it was his imagination. Let him sweat. Let him wonder if I'd heard everything, or nothing at all. Because tomorrow I was going to give him exactly what he was asking for. A signature. Just not the kind he expected. I waited until morning to make my move. Nate had disappeared for a few hours after that phone call on the porch, probably to cool down or get advice from whatever deadbeat was coaching him through this mess. When he came back late, I was already in bed, or so he thought. At 6 a.m. sharp, I was in the kitchen, documents spread neatly across the table, steam rising from my coffee. I heard him come down the stairs, slower than usual. He paused in the doorway when he saw the papers. "Morning," I said. "Can I talk to you a minute?" He hesitated. Then, like he couldn't help himself, nodded. "Sure." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Take a seat." He did. My voice was calm. Just tired enough. Just resigned enough. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day. About downsizing. About maybe letting go of this place." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Really?" "Yeah. It's a big house for one person. Full of memories, sure. But that's all they are now." He relaxed a little in his seat. "So what, you're selling?" "Eventually," I said. "But first I thought I'd transfer some power of attorney. Just in case something happens to me before I can get the paperwork moving." His throat moved as he swallowed. I slid the top document toward him. A legal-looking page, stamped and signed, but fake. Every bit of it, courtesy of Deborah Lynn's real estate paralegal skills. The power of attorney form had all the right formatting and all the wrong implications. I watched him read it, trying to look disinterested. "This would give you limited access," I said, "to help with house stuff, bills, maybe some transactions. Nothing permanent." He nodded too quickly. "Would Lauren sign too?" he asked. "Later," I said. "For now, just you. I trust you." He almost choked on the sentence. But he hid it well. He picked up the pen. "You sure about this, David?" "I've never been more sure." He signed with a flourish, trying to make it look casual, trying to hide how badly he wanted it. I folded the document, tucked it into a plain envelope, and said nothing more. Let him think the con was complete. He left the kitchen with a bounce in his step. Probably texted his friend before he even hit the hallway. I imagined the message. "He bought it. Idiot signed over control. Is happening." But that wasn't what had happened. Because that paper didn't give him anything. No access. No authority. No leverage. In fact, if he tried to use it anywhere, it would flag the bank immediately. Deborah's silent trigger built into the header. Fraud detection 101. But he didn't know that. He thought he'd won. Which meant I was now free to take the next step. That afternoon, I called Charlie again. "Thursday," I said. "Everything will happen Thursday. You want me there?" "Not yet. But be on standby." Then I packed a small suitcase. Just one change of clothes, my documents, Alice's photo, and the real will, the one that had Nate's name blacked out in thick ink. I left the suitcase in the trunk of my car, just in case. At dinner, Lauren cooked pasta. Nate was all smiles, suddenly polite, overly helpful, clearing the table without being asked. She joked that he was finally getting the hang of domestic life. I just nodded. Seems like he's finding his rhythm. He grinned at me like the cat that swallowed the canary. That night, I didn't wait for him to sneak around. I knocked on the guest room door at 10:45 p.m. Lauren was in bed reading. Nate opened the door in a t-shirt, trying to act surprised. "Got a second?" I asked. He followed me down the hall. I led him into my study, closed the door behind us. "There's something I didn't mention this morning," I said. His shoulders stiffened. I walked to the bookshelf, pulled down a manila folder. "Back in the 90s, I said slowly, I did some freelance security consulting. Banks mostly. Insurance fraud. Fake identities. I learned a lot about signatures. About desperation." I turned and looked him straight in the eyes. "You know what the hardest part of fraud is?" He didn't answer. "Knowing when you've gone too far." Then I handed him the folder. Inside, a photocopy of the fake power of attorney. Stamped void. Highlighted. Annotated in red ink. "I gave you rope," I said. "You chose to hang yourself." His face turned white. But I wasn't finished. He stared at the folder like it was radioactive. "What is this?" he finally asked, but his voice had cracked. That thin veil of arrogance starting to peel. "You tell me," I said calmly. "You signed it. Do you remember that part?" He swallowed. His eyes flicked toward the door, toward the hallway, toward the stairs. Flight paths. But he didn't move. "Listen, David," he started, stepping forward. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding, Nate." I cut him off. "I know about the key. I know you've been in my room. I know you've gone through my files, my drawers, my life." He froze. I stepped closer, close enough to smell his cologne, the cheap kind that tries too hard. "You've been treating me like some half-blind retiree too sentimental to notice his house is being cased." I tapped the folder in his hand. "But you forgot what I used to do for a living. You forgot who built this house from nothing. And you forgot that I pay attention to everything." He tried to speak again, but I raised a hand. "Save it. I'm not calling the police. Not yet." Relief washed over his face way too quickly. "But," I continued, "you're going to tell Lauren everything. Tonight." That wiped the relief clean. "You're insane," he hissed. "You want me to just admit it? To her?" "I want you to have the guts to tell the truth," I said. "For once in your life." He stepped back, laughing quietly, nervously. "You think she'll believe you over me? You think she'd even care? She's loyal, David. She's my wife. That's when I smiled. I walked to my desk and picked up my phone. Swiped to the voice recordings. Tuesday night, I said. Midnight. You were on the phone near the vent. Your gambling buddy? The one who's been asking when you'll pay him back? His mouth opened, then closed. I hit play. His voice filled the study. Clear. Desperate. Incriminating. The old man's definitely loaded. I already got the key. We'll be gone before he knows what hit him. The recording ended. Silence. He sat down without being asked. For the first time, he looked exactly like what he was. A scared man who'd bet on the wrong thing. Not on a game or a loan shark. He'd bet against me. And now the debt was due. I let the silence hang there for a full minute. Then I spoke. You've got one chance to salvage something from this. You tell her. You explain everything. You tell her about the debts, the plan, the safe, the lies. And if I don't? Then you'll find out what else I recorded, I said, which wasn't entirely true. But he didn't know that. He stared at the floor. I need a day, he said. You have until dinner tomorrow, I replied. Then I tell her myself. The next morning, I acted like nothing had happened. We had breakfast. Lauren asked if I wanted to go with her to the farmer's market. I said I was tired. Nate said he had some errands to run. He didn't meet my eyes once. By 11 a.m., I was alone in the house. I poured coffee, sat at the kitchen table and looked out the window. The wind was picking up. Clouds thickening. Storm coming. Exactly what I needed. 2:15 p.m., Nate came back. His footsteps were heavy, his face pale. He'd spent the morning thinking, probably talking to someone who told him to run. He didn't. He just sat across from me again. Dinner, he said quietly. I'll tell her then. I nodded. That's smart. At 6 p.m. sharp, Lauren started setting the table. Roasted chicken. Red wine. She smiled, humming to herself, oblivious to the avalanche on its way. Nate sat across from her, silent, fork barely moving, sweat on his temple. Is everything okay? She asked gently, and he opened his mouth. But he didn't speak. He looked at me. He blinked. And then he stood up, walked to the hallway, grabbed his coat, and walked out the front door. Just like that. Gone. Lauren turned to me, confused. Where's he going? I looked down at my plate. I think, I said quietly, he's running out of options. Lauren waited 15 minutes. She stood by the front door, phone in hand, pacing, texting, calling. No response. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe he forgot something at the store, maybe he needed air, maybe he was upset. Her words got softer with each theory, her confidence dimming like a bulb fading out. He's not answering, she said, finally turning to me. I just nodded. He'll be back when he's ready. But I knew he wouldn't be. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. We sat in the living room in silence. The TV played some muted drama neither of us watched. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Lauren's wine glass sat untouched. Her knee bounced rhythmically, the way it used to when she was nervous before school plays. He's been strange lately, she said, not looking at me. Withdrawn. Distant. I thought it was stress. I didn't answer. I let the space between us fill with what I couldn't say yet. He lost his job 6 months ago, she continued. Did I tell you that? He said he was freelancing. But he never showed me anything. No contracts. No emails. Just a vague stories. Her voice cracked. He said I didn't need to worry. That he had it handled. She looked at me then, and this time she really looked. Do you know something, Dad? I sighed. There it was. The moment when the curtain lifts. I know more than I wanted to, I said. She froze. Nate was in my room. He found the safe key. He broke into it. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. He read private documents, financial statements, titles. He was looking for leverage, and not just out of curiosity. Lauren looked like I'd slapped her. What are you talking about? I leaned forward, hands folded. He has gambling debts, Lauren. Significant ones. He's been making promises he can't keep to dangerous people. And he planned to use what he found here, in this house, to fix it. No, she whispered. That's not Nate. He was going to disappear, I said, voice steady. Take whatever he could get, and leave. She stood suddenly, like her body needed distance from the words. You have proof. I reached for my phone. I have a recording. Tuesday night. He was on the phone with someone, laying out the plan in detail. She didn't ask to hear it. She just stood there, eyes filling, shoulders slowly curling inward. And then she sat back down. We didn't talk much for the rest of the night. She went upstairs early. I heard the bedroom door close, soft and final. No crying. No outburst. Just silence. The kind of silence that knows when it's been lied to. I sat alone in the living room, watching the shadows on the walls move with the wind. The house felt heavier now. Not just because of what had happened, but because I knew she was upstairs blaming herself. She always tried to fix things, and now she had to accept she couldn't fix this. At 11:40 p.m., I got a text. Unknown number. Tell Lauren I'm sorry. I messed up. I'll call when I can. Don't tell anyone where I go. I didn't reply, not out of spite, but because the apology wasn't for me, and because some exits don't come with explanations. The next morning, Lauren made coffee. She looked tired, but something had shifted. Her movements were deliberate, her jaw set. She poured 2 mugs and slid one across the table. Do you still have Mom's lawyer's number? She asked. I nodded. You want to call her today? Lauren didn't answer right away. Then she said, I want to find out exactly what's in my name, and what's not. Deborah met us that afternoon. She came to the house in jeans and a blazer, her briefcase packed full of paperwork and calm. Lauren greeted her at the door like someone greeting a nurse after a bad fall. Grateful, but already bracing for pain. We sat at the dining table. Same place where Nate had signed the fake power of attorney. Same spot where he'd smiled like he'd won. I pulled out the real documents, the will, the deed, the trust files. Deborah reviewed them quickly. Nothing had been compromised. Nate's name didn't appear anywhere. Not on the title, not on the accounts, not on my will. Lauren exhaled visibly. He really thought he had something, she said bitterly. He thought you'd never look, I replied. That you'd defend him while he gutted you behind your back. Her eyes hardened. He thought wrong. That night we didn't speak much. She cooked dinner. I washed up. Quiet settled over the house like a blanket that didn't quite cover your toes. At one point, she asked, Did you ever like him? I thought about it. No, I said, but I wanted to. For you. She nodded like she'd already expected that. I didn't see it, she said. I really didn't. You weren't supposed to. He's the type that knows how to hide when people love him. Her eyes welled, but she didn't let the tears fall. She just whispered, I was so sure he was better than this. I said nothing, because that's the trick about betrayal. It always wears the face of someone you trusted. On Thursday, I got a call from Charlie. You want me to come over now? He asked. I looked out the window. The street was empty. No sign of Nate's car. No footsteps on the sidewalk. Not yet, I said. Still playing the long game? It's the only game I know how to win. He chuckled. That's what I always liked about you, David. You don't bark. You just bite when it counts. At 5:45 p.m., Nate's number flashed across my screen. I let it ring. Then I picked up on the last tone. His voice was wrecked, like someone who hadn't slept in days. Is she okay? She's stronger than you think, I said. Long pause. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Funny, I said. That's usually what people say after it's already gone too far. I just needed time. I thought if I could get one clean break, one win, I could fix everything. No, I said. You thought if you could take what wasn't yours, you wouldn't have to face what you'd become. He didn't argue. He just said, Tell her I'm sorry. You tell her, I said, and hung up. That night, Lauren and I sat on the porch for the first time in months. She sipped tea. I drank whiskey. She asked, "Do you think he ever loved me?" "I think he loved what you gave him," I said. "Stability, cover, a place to hide." "That's not love." "No," I said. "It's not." She didn't cry. Instead, she asked, "Did Mom ever make mistakes like this?" I smiled. "She married me, didn't she?" Lauren finally laughed. A real laugh, short and cracked, but honest. "Do you think he'll come back?" she asked after a while. I looked out at the street, the empty dark. "No," I said, "but he'll remember this house for the rest of his life." 2 weeks passed. No word, no messages, no Nate. The silence didn't feel peaceful, not yet, but it stopped vibrating with tension. Lauren started sleeping through the night again. She stopped checking her phone every 10 minutes. She went back to work full-time. I didn't ask if she was hoping he'd call. Some things are better left unspoken. Instead, I focused on the house, fixed the gutter that had been sagging for months, restained the deck, reorganized the shed. It wasn't about the chores. It was about reminding myself that this house was still mine, that no one had taken anything, not really, not the memories, not the value, not the control. One afternoon, I caught Lauren standing in front of the safe. It was closed, untouched. She didn't open it. She just looked at it like it was some kind of ghost. "That's where it happened, isn't it?" she asked. I joined her by the doorway. "That's where he happened. But he's not here anymore." She nodded, slowly. Then she said something that stopped me cold. "I want to sell the house." I didn't answer at first. Not because I was angry, I wasn't, but because the request didn't surprise me. Not after what had happened. For her, this house had changed. What once held family now held betrayal. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a wound with walls. "I understand," I said. I need a clean slate," she whispered. "I don't want to walk past the guest room and think about him, or cook in the kitchen where I watched you pretend everything was fine while it was falling apart." I nodded. "Where would you go?" I asked. She shrugged. "Back to Portland, maybe. Or Boston. Somewhere rainy." "Your mother hated Boston," I said. "She hated the traffic," Lauren corrected, smiling faintly. The next day, we met with Deborah again. We reviewed the deed, the valuation, the options. She gave us a ballpark estimate that surprised both of us. The market had soared. "You'd walk away with more than enough," Deborah said. "You could start over anywhere." Lauren looked at me, silently asking the question she was too polite to say aloud. I nodded. "I'll move too." "Are you sure?" "This house doesn't need me anymore," I said. "And I don't need to be the man who haunts it." We listed the property the following week. The photos went online, staged with perfect lighting and fresh paint. It didn't even look like our home anymore. Just another perfectly packaged square box for someone else to make their mistakes in. We had 3 offers in 2 days, all above asking. Lauren handled most of the paperwork. She was like a different person, focused, clear, detached. But I saw the way her fingers trembled every time she had to initial something. Closure is harder than signatures. On the final day, we walked through the house one last time. Room by room. The kitchen. The study. The hallway where I'd heard Nate's voice echo through the vent. "I'm not going to forget," she said quietly. "You're not supposed to," I replied. We ended in the living room. She picked up the last photo still on the shelf. One of her as a toddler on my shoulders, both of us covered in ice cream. "I used to think this place was sacred," she said. "It was," I said. "But sacred doesn't mean permanent. It just means it mattered." She nodded. Then we turned off the lights and closed the door behind us. We moved into a rental on the north side of town while everything settled. Smaller, quieter. 2 bedrooms, a balcony, thin walls. It wasn't home, not yet, but it wasn't haunted either. That made it enough. Lauren started therapy. On her own terms. She didn't tell me much and I didn't ask. But I could see the change in how she carried herself. Less apology. More backbone. She even started taking long walks again. Headphones in. Face blank. Like she was burning off something she didn't have words for yet. Sometimes, I'd catch her writing in a notebook with no title on the cover. Just a pen moving across the page like it owed her answers. I think she was writing him out of her system. One morning in April, a thick envelope arrived addressed to Lauren in Nate's handwriting. She opened it in the kitchen. Her hands didn't shake. It held no letter, just a cashier's check. Partial repayment. $20,000. No explanation, no signature, just a number and silence. She stared at it for a full minute. Then she folded it, placed it neatly back in the envelope and said, "He's trying to absolve himself without saying a word. What are you going to do with it?" I asked. "I'm going to deposit it," she said calmly. "And then I'm going to use it to pay for things that have nothing to do with him." That night, she booked a trip to Lisbon. One way. "You leaving for good?" I asked gently. "I need distance," she said. "And I don't know how long that takes." I nodded. "I'm not running," she added. "I just want to know who I am without the noise." I could respect that, because in truth, she wasn't the only one rebuilding. The day before her flight, we went out for lunch. Nothing fancy, a little diner near the freeway. Cheap coffee, stale fries, but we talked. About her childhood. About Alice. About the way grief folds itself into new shapes over time. "I think I spent the last 5 years trying to make something look perfect," Lauren said. "Not real. Just clean. Peeling." "You mean your marriage?" She nodded. "And everything around it. The job, the photos, the dinners, the vacations. I was curating a life, not living one. I didn't offer wisdom, just listened. She didn't need a father to fix things. She needed one to witness them. Before bed that night, she gave me a hug. Not a polite one. Not performative. A real one. Solid and quiet. "Thank you," she said into my shoulder. "For what?" "For letting me fall apart without trying to stop me." The next morning, I watched her walk through airport security with just a backpack and that same notebook. She didn't look back. And I didn't wave. That's how I knew she was going to be okay. I drove home through early morning fog. The roads were empty. The kind of empty that feels holy. Back at the apartment, I poured a cup of black coffee, opened the balcony door, and let the air in. No Nate. No safe. No fake documents. No lies. Just a man and his silence. And for the first time in years, it felt like mine. It's been 9 months. The seasons turned. The city changed its rhythm. Lauren sends postcards sometimes, not emails, not texts. Just real paper with real stamps. She never writes much. Just things like, "The oranges here taste like sunlight." Or, "I walked 10 miles today without thinking once of him." I keep them in a drawer by the sink. I read them when the apartment feels too quiet. She hasn't asked to come back. I haven't asked her to. We both know the door's open. But sometimes healing requires a continent between you and your past. As for Nate, he hasn't resurfaced. Every so often, I search his name online. A habit I wish I could break. No arrest. No obituary. No sign of redemption or destruction. Just absence. Like he dissolved into the wind the day he left. I imagine he's somewhere low rent, selling promises he can't keep, charming strangers who haven't yet learned what his charm costs. But I don't worry, because I gave him something he didn't expect. A mirror. And men like him can't look at themselves for long without flinching. Last week, I finally sold the old truck. Alice used to call it the anchor. Not because it was heavy, but because it kept me stuck. I thought I'd be more emotional watching it drive away. But I wasn't. I just stood on the curb, hands in my pockets, feeling lighter. When the dealer pulled off, I didn't wave. I just turned and walked inside. That night, I slept better than I had in years. I still wake early. Still make coffee at sunrise. Still read the paper with a pen in hand, underlining articles like Alice used to. Some days I take the long route home just to see the old street. The house is different now. New curtains, different car in the driveway, some kids' bikes on the lawn. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't belong to me anymore. What mattered from that house is already here, stitched into my bones. The lessons, the warnings, the sharp, quiet truth. Sometimes the people who smile at your table are the ones watching your pockets. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is let them see what you've seen, even if it breaks them. This morning, I opened a fresh envelope from Lisbon. A single line, in Lauren's handwriting. I bought a house. It's small, but it's mine. That was all she wrote. That was all she needed to. I folded the postcard, placed it in the drawer, and went back to my coffee. Outside, the world moved on. And for once, I didn't feel left behind. I felt free.